Hello there. Welcome. Tonight we will drift slowly into the world of Genghis Khan, a world of endless grasslands, skies that never seem to end, and a child named Temüjin, born into hardship, destined for greatness. Before we begin, allow yourself to soften. Maybe you are lying down, lights low, eyes heavy. Or maybe you are listening in stillness after a long day. This is not a fast story, not a tale of noise and urgency. It is a gentle unfolding, a quiet walk through time. Words will come slowly, sometimes in long winding paths, sometimes in short pauses, like wind brushing across tall grass. Let the sounds carry you without effort. You may listen closely to every moment, or you may allow them to drift away, fading like hoofbeats over the horizon. Either way, you are safe here, and the story will wait for you. The steppe where Temüjin was born was vast and unforgiving. Winters cut through with bitter cold. Summers baked the land dry. And storms could appear without warning, sweeping across valleys and ridges as if the sky itself had turned against the earth. Life here was never gentle. Families moved with their herds, always seeking water and pasture, always fighting hunger and cold. It was here, near the Onan River, around the year 1162, that Temüjin first opened his eyes to the world. His father, Yesugei, was a respected leader of the Börte clan. His mother, Holun, a woman of unshakable strength, carried her children through hardship that would have broken many others. From the beginning, the boy's life was carved not by comfort, but by survival. When he was still a child, tragedy swept over them. His father was poisoned by enemies, leaving the family suddenly leaderless. Without a protector, the clan abandoned them. Cast out into the wilderness, they were left to fend for themselves. Holun gathered her children and endured, digging roots from frozen soil, catching fish from rivers, doing whatever was needed to keep them alive. Imagine the winds tearing across the steppe, the sky dark with clouds. A mother leading her children through hunger and danger. Step after step, night after night, they survived not through strength of numbers, but through sheer will. For Temüjin, these years were more than hardship. They were lessons. He learned that betrayal could come swiftly, but loyalty was priceless. He saw that survival was not about muscle alone, but about trust, about unity, about the bonds that held people together when storms came. Even as a boy, he began to form bonds that would shape his future. One of the most important was with Jamukha, another youth of noble blood. Together they swore the oath of Anda, sworn brothers bound by blood, believing they would never part. At first, their bond seemed eternal, but the steppe was a land where loyalty could shift like wind across grass. As they grew into men, both sought followers, both dreamed of leadership, and slowly, cracks appeared in their brotherhood. Before the break, Temüjin began to show his own way of leading. Unlike others, he did not rely only on birth or inheritance. He valued skill, loyalty, and courage, even among men of low rank. Those who followed him were rewarded fairly. Those who betrayed him were punished swiftly. To many, this felt new, revolutionary, and more just than the old ways. But the road ahead was filled with trials. Rivals captured him, placed him in heavy wooden stocks, and held him as a slave. Yet he escaped, aided by a single guard who chose mercy. From that day, he carried with him the lesson that even in chains, kindness and loyalty could open the way to freedom. By his 20s, he began to gather true strength. He took as his wife Börte, a woman of courage and resilience. Their marriage sealed alliances, but it was also filled with trust and affection. Yet even this union was scarred by violence, for rivals raided their camp, kidnapped Börte, and carried her away. Temüjin gathered his men and rode hard to rescue her, fighting not only for love, but for honor. The victory brought her back to his side, and the story of that rescue spread across the steppe, adding to his reputation as a leader who refused to surrender. On the steppe, reputation was survival. In a world where tribes shifted allegiance like clouds, to be known as just, strong, and fair was to gain men willing to fight under your banner. Whispers spread of this young man, this Temüjin who punished theft, who divided spoils equally, who rewarded the loyal regardless of birth. To follow him meant safety, fairness, and purpose, and so more came to him. But power never goes unchallenged. And soon he found himself again facing his sworn brother Jamukha, no longer brothers, but rivals. The clash was brutal. Temüjin's men fought with new discipline, organized into units of 10, of 100, of 1,000. Signals given by drums and banners, not by chaos and shouts. For a time, this order overcame the greater numbers of Jamukha. But betrayal struck once more. Allies deserted Temüjin, leaving him vulnerable. Jamukha's revenge was savage. He captured 70 of Temüjin's followers and executed them by boiling them alive. The cruelty shocked even the hardened tribes of the steppe. From that moment, no one would ever again think of the two men as brothers. Yet cruelty can weaken even the victorious. Many tribes turned away from Jamukha after such horror, and slowly, Temüjin rebuilt, stronger than before. His vision clearer now. He saw that the old tribal ways were too fragile, too easy to break. Survival demanded a new system. He began to form the Yasa, a law that bound all under him. It punished betrayal, outlawed theft, demanded loyalty, and ensured fairness. For the first time, the steppe had a code greater than kinship. His army grew not only in size, but in unity. Imagine standing upon a hill, looking down at endless lines of riders, banners streaming in the wind. Each man knowing his place, each leader his duty. The chaos of the past replaced by rhythm, structure, discipline. With this army, Temüjin struck back at rivals. He crushed the Merkits, avenging Börte's abduction. He destroyed the Tatars, ancient enemies of his people, executing their leaders so none could rise again. Each victory added weight to his name. By the year 1201, he was already called a Khan, though not yet the Great One. The tribes still resisted. Rivals gathered together, and Jamukha still claimed to be the rightful ruler. The battles grew larger, the plains thundered with hooves, order clashing against chaos. Slowly, discipline proved stronger than numbers. One by one, tribes abandoned Jamukha and bent the knee to Temüjin. In 1206, the tribes gathered for a great assembly, a Kurultai. Here, in the heart of the steppe, they raised him high. They gave him a new name, Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. From that moment, the steppe was his. Yet even then, his gaze reached further. For beyond the endless grasslands lay kingdoms of stone, cities rich with treasures, walls that dared to block the horizon. To conquer them would be to test the very limits of his vision. The boy of the Onon River, once abandoned to hunger, had become the ruler of the Mongols. And soon, the world itself would learn the name Genghis Khan. When the tribes of the steppe lifted Temüjin high and called him Genghis Khan, the winds across Mongolia seemed to carry a new weight. He was no longer a leader of one clan, no longer just another warlord. He was the universal ruler, chosen by the Great Assembly, the Kurultai, to command the whole of the Mongols. For many, it was a moment of triumph. For him, it was the beginning of something even greater. The endless grasslands had been tamed, but the world beyond them was filled with cities, kingdoms, and empires of stone. The steppe had given him riders, loyal men trained in discipline, but the steppe could not give him the riches, the trade, or the glory that lay behind walls. His eyes turned first to the lands of the Western Shia, a kingdom known as Shia. stretching across the deserts and mountains of northern China. Their rulers were Tangut lords, proud of their wealth and their fortified cities. To the nomads of the steppe, the Tangut seemed immovable, but to Genghis Khan, they were the first test, the first step beyond the plains. Imagine the contrast. The Mongols lived in tents of felt, moving with the seasons. Their wealth was horses, sheep, and the wide sky. The Tangut lived behind walls, in cities filled with markets and temples. Their wealth was measured in silk, grain, and silver. When riders from the steppe looked upon such cities, it was as though they had entered another world. The campaign began with raids, swift strikes across borders, Mongol horsemen sweeping down upon villages and caravans, returning with loot and captives. To the Tangut lords, it must have seemed like little more than harassment. But Genghis Khan was learning, testing their defenses, watching how their armies responded. The Mongol horse was unmatched. Each rider carried a small bow made of horn and sinew, powerful enough to pierce armor at great distance. They rode with several spare horses, allowing them to switch mounts and cover vast distances without tiring their animals. They could move faster than any enemy, strike where least expected, and vanish before reinforcements arrived. But against fortified walls, bows and horses were not enough. Cities stood strong, unless one had the skill to bring them down. And so, Genghis Khan began to learn new arts of war. He captured Chinese engineers, men skilled in siegecraft, and placed them under Mongol command. Soon his army carried catapults, siege carts, and great ladders, weapons to break stone as well as spirit. The first campaigns against Western Xia were not easy. The Tangut fought back fiercely, relying on their cities and their armies of foot soldiers. But the Mongols struck again and again, returning each year with new tactics. Slowly, their discipline and speed began to wear down the defenders, until finally, the Tangut rulers agreed to submit, offering tribute of silk and grain. For the Mongols, this was more than victory. It was proof that the riders of the steppe could overcome walls, that no city was truly safe. With the submission of Western Xia, Genghis Khan looked further east, toward the much greater empire of the Jin Dynasty. The Jin ruled northern China. Their emperors claimed the mandate of heaven. Their cities were vast, filled with markets, temples, and palaces. Their walls stretched for miles, stronger than anything the Mongols had yet faced. To attack them seemed impossible. Yet for Genghis Khan, impossibility was only a challenge waiting for patience. He began by striking their borders, raiding towns, capturing supplies, and retreating before large armies could gather. Slowly, he tested the defenses. His riders learned the lay of the land, the rivers, the passes, the weaknesses in the wall. Then came the Great Campaign. In 1211, the Mongols rode south in force, an army said to number over 100,000 horsemen. They swept through the passes, striking fear into the heart of the Jin. At the Battle of Yehuling, they faced a massive Jin army, perhaps even larger than their own, but discipline carried the day. The Mongols used feigned retreats, drawing the enemy into ambushes, encircling them with speed and precision. Picture the scene: dust rising like a storm across the plain, Jin soldiers pressing forward, believing victory within reach. Then the Mongols wheel around, arrows darkening the sky, drums sounding commands, banners shifting with the wind. In hours, the Jin army breaks, their numbers crushed, their spirit shattered. With victory at Yehuling, the Mongols swept deeper into Jin territory. Cities fell one after another. Some surrendered quickly, hoping for mercy. Others resisted and faced the terrible wrath of siege and slaughter. For Genghis Khan demanded loyalty, but he gave no forgiveness to those who defied him once his armies arrived. As the Mongols advanced, they practiced psychological war. They spread terror deliberately, making examples of those who resisted. Word traveled quickly, and often cities opened their gates rather than risk destruction. It was not only strength, but fear that paved their way. By 1215, the Mongols reached the great city of Zhongdu, the capital of the Jin, where Beijing stands today. The siege was long and brutal. For months, the Mongols encircled the walls, cutting off supplies, building siege towers, hurling fire and stones with their catapults. Inside, the defenders struggled with hunger and despair. Imagine the silence of the night, broken by the crash of stones against walls, the glow of fire rising into sky, the cries of horses echoing across the plain, until finally, the city fell, and the Mongols poured through. It was said the slaughter was immense, but the message was clear. No wall could stand forever. With the fall of Zhongdu, the Jin were broken, though not yet destroyed. Their emperors fled south, holding on to what they could. But for Genghis Khan, the victory was enough. He had proven that his riders, his discipline, and his vision could topple even the greatest empire of the north. Between campaigns, he returned often to Mongolia, not only to rest, but to strengthen his laws, the Yasa. He enforced order across his people. He demanded loyalty. He rewarded the faithful and punished betrayal without hesitation. Slowly, the Mongol nation became not just a collection of tribes, but a single people, bound by law and oath. His authority stretched across steppes that had never known unity. His armies rode with discipline that no enemy could match, and his ambition grew with every victory. Beyond the Jin, beyond the mountains and deserts, lay other kingdoms. The riches of the Silk Road, the cities of Central Asia, the caliphates of the West. The world seemed vast, but to Genghis Khan it was all within reach. For now, though, pause a moment in your imagination. Picture the great Khan seated in his felt tent, the gur lit softly by firelight, banners hung above him, warriors kneeling in loyalty at his side. Outside, the steppe stretches wide under the stars, horses resting, fires glowing across the camp like scattered constellations on the earth. The boy abandoned in hunger had become a ruler of nations, and soon the world would tremble beneath the hoofbeats of his armies. After the fall of Chengdu, the capital of the Jin, the name of Genghis Khan carried across Asia like the echo of thunder. To the north and east, the steppes bowed to his rule. To the south, the Jin trembled behind what cities they still held. And to the west, kingdoms listened in uneasy silence, wondering if the storm of hooves would one day reach their gates. The Khan did not rest. For him, conquest was not only survival, it was destiny. And as he looked westward, he saw lands rich with trade, cities that glittered along the ancient routes of the Silk Road, and empires that believed themselves untouchable behind walls and distance. The first of these was the kingdom of the Khwarazmians, an empire stretching across Persia, Transoxiana, and the deserts of Central Asia. Their ruler was the Shah Ala ad-Din Muhammad, a man proud of his power, suspicious of strangers, and unprepared for what was coming. At first, Genghis Khan did not ride to war. He sent envoys, seeking trade and alliance. For he knew the wealth of his people lay not only in conquest, but in the flow of goods, silk from China, silver from Persia, spices from India. He sought safe passage for caravans, gifts exchanged between empires. But pride is a dangerous thing. The Shah of Khwarazm was wary of the Mongols. He looked upon them as barbarians of the steppe, unworthy of equal standing. When a caravan of Mongol merchants arrived, it was seized, the traders executed, their goods stolen. To Genghis Khan, this was not just insult, it was betrayal. He sent envoys demanding justice, but the Shah went further. He had the envoys killed, in defiance of every law of diplomacy. And in that moment, he sealed the fate of his empire. Imagine the silence in the gur of the Khan when the news arrived, the firelight flickering against banners, warriors watching in silence, the Khan himself seated, his face still, his voice quiet, but in his heart, the decision was already made. The Khwarazmian Empire would be destroyed, root and branch. In 1219, the Mongol armies rode west. They did not come as raiders, but as a force prepared for annihilation, perhaps 200,000 strong. Riders hardened by years of war, siege engines dragged across deserts, discipline sharp as steel. The first great city to face them was Bukhara, jewel of Transoxiana, its walls high, its mosques filled with scholars, its markets overflowing with goods. To the people inside, the Mongols must have seemed like shadows from another world. When the city fell, Genghis Khan entered its great mosque, stood before the people, and declared himself the scourge sent by heaven. He told them plainly, their fate had been sealed by their ruler's arrogance, their lives spared only by surrender, their wealth now flowing to the Mongols. From Bukhara, the Mongols swept to Samarkand, another jewel of the Silk Road. The Shah gathered his forces to defend it, archers lining the walls, cavalry waiting in fields beyond. But the Mongols fought with strategy, feigned retreats, sudden ambushes, catapults raining fire and stone. In days, the defenses collapsed, Samarkand fell, and with it the heart of Khwarazmian power. The Shah fled, abandoning his people, pursued endlessly by Mongol riders. His empire disintegrated as city after city opened its gates or was burned to ash. The Mongols chased him across deserts, over mountains, until finally he died in exile, broken and alone. But the Mongols did not stop with his death. They carried fire across Persia. Cities that resisted were destroyed utterly, men slain, women and children taken captive. Cities that surrendered quickly were often spared, allowed to live under tribute. The message was clear: submit and survive, resist and be erased. One city that resisted fiercely was Nishapur. There, the son-in-law of the Khan was killed in battle. In fury, the Mongols unleashed terrible retribution. The city was leveled, its people slaughtered. A darkness fell over the land, whispered of for centuries afterward. Yet not all was destruction, for where cities submitted, the Mongols imposed order. They restored markets, protected caravans, and ensured safety along the roads. For Genghis Khan was not only conqueror, he was builder of a vast network, a world where goods and ideas could move faster than ever before. Imagine the caravan routes stretching from China to the Caspian Sea, guarded now by Mongol patrols, silk flowing west, silver and glass flowing east, spices carried across mountains, letters sent by riders from one end of the empire to another. It was brutal empire, yet strangely efficient. Still, the war against the Khwarazmians was ruthless. The Mongols split their armies, each column striking deep into enemy lands, moving faster than defenders could respond, like a storm that breaks in many places at once, overwhelming all resistance. One force rode through Persia, burning cities that resisted. Another swept through the Caucasus, defeating armies of Georgians and Armenians. Another pressed into the lands of the Rus, reaching as far as the edges of Europe before turning back. Picture the terror of villages as word spread. Rumors of riders who came like ghosts, moving day and night. Arrows falling like rain, cities vanishing in smoke. To many, it seemed less like an army and more like fate itself. Yet even in conquest, Genghis Khan remained methodical. He spared craftsmen, scholars, and those with skills useful to his empire. He moved populations across lands, relocating artisans to new centers, spreading knowledge even as he spread fear. His empire was not random chaos. It was deliberate, organized, relentless. As the Khwarazmian Empire crumbled, the Khan's reputation grew larger than life. To friend and foe alike, he seemed unstoppable. His armies had crossed deserts thought impassable, besieged cities thought unbreakable, defeated rulers thought invincible. But the price was heavy. Entire cities erased, cultures scarred, populations scattered. To those who lived through it, the coming of the Mongols was remembered as fire and ash. To the Mongols themselves, it was justice for insult, proof that no betrayal would go unanswered. By 1221, the Khwarazmian Empire was no more. Its lands absorbed into the growing Mongol world, its cities either destroyed or brought under tribute. The Silk Road now lay open under Mongol control, and in the quiet that followed, the Khan sat once more in his tent, the gear glowing with firelight, maps spread before him, his generals kneeling at his side. Beyond the walls of felt, the night winds carried the sound of horses grazing. The world was changing, and at its center was one man, once abandoned child, now master of half the known world. The Khwarazmian Empire was gone, broken into ashes beneath the hooves of the Mongols. Yet the riders of Genghis Khan did not stop at the edge of Persia, for the Khan believed that no land was beyond his reach, and no insult should be left unpunished. After the fall of Samarkand and Bukhara, after the Shah had fled into exile, the Mongol armies split apart like rivers flowing in different directions. Each column carried the same discipline, the same ferocity, and the same unbending command: to bring the world beneath the rule of the eternal blue sky. One force pressed deeper into Persia, riding through deserts and mountains where the air burned by day and froze by night. They stormed cities that still resisted, burning those who defied them, sparing only those who opened their gates and offered tribute. Another army swept through the Caucasus, clashing with Georgians and Armenians, defeating armies that gathered to oppose them. Each victory widening the shadow of Mongol power. Imagine the people of these lands, hearing distant thunder long before the riders appeared, villages whispering of enemies who moved day and night, who seemed never to tire, who struck with arrows from afar and then vanished into dust. To many, the Mongols seemed less like men and more like a force of nature, a storm that could not be resisted. In Georgia, The king gathered his knights, armored riders who believed their steel could withstand any foe. They charged with lances lowered, banners snapping in wind. But the Mongols did not meet them head-on. They wheeled away, feigning retreat, drawing the knights into pursuit, until the trap closed, arrows falling from every side, horses collapsing under wounds, lances breaking in confusion. By nightfall, the battlefield was silence. Further west, the Armenians too felt the weight of Mongol war. Fortresses long thought secure found themselves surrounded by engines of siege, ladders rising against stone, fire raining down from catapults. Within days, gates that had stood for generations splintered, and cities fell into Mongol hands. The Khan himself directed from afar, sending trusted generals such as Subutai and Jebi, men of cunning as well as courage. Subutai in particular was a master of strategy, patient, methodical, always striking where the enemy was weakest. He would one day lead armies deep into Europe itself, but here, in the mountains and valleys of the Caucasus, he learned to break kings who believed themselves safe in their fortresses. One story tells of how the Mongols lured an alliance of Georgians, Armenians, and Kipchak Turks into a single battle. The allies believed their numbers would overwhelm the riders, but the Mongols retreated slowly, drawing them on for days, until exhaustion set in. Then the trap was sprung. The allies were surrounded, crushed in waves of arrows and charges, their unity broken, their hope gone. By 1221, Mongol banners flew from the Caspian Sea to the heart of Persia. From mountains to deserts, the empire stretched further than any rider had imagined. Yet still, the Khan hungered for more. He sent Jebe and Subutai on a great expedition to test the lands beyond the Caucasus. They crossed rivers and mountains, striking into the lands of the Kipchaks and Rus, sweeping through villages and towns that had never heard of the Mongols before that day. Imagine a Rus village, quiet under falling snow, bells sounding from a wooden church, smoke rising from chimneys. Then in the distance, black shapes appear on the horizon, moving fast, arrows glittering in the pale light. Before the alarm can spread, the Mongols are upon them, arrows flying, fires kindling, voices shouting in terror. For the people of the Rus, it was as if a shadow had descended from nowhere. At the Battle of the Kalka River in 1223, the Mongols faced a coalition of Rus princes and their Kipchak allies. Perhaps 30,000 men gathered against them, believing their numbers could finally halt the storm. But the Mongols played their game of patience, retreating slowly, stretching the coalition across miles of steppe. Day after day, the allies followed until exhaustion and hunger weighed them down. Then suddenly, the Mongols turned, striking with ferocity, encircling their pursuers. Arrows rained from every side. The coalition broke. Men fled into rivers, trampled by their own allies. Leaders were captured and executed in cruel fashion. The battle left the Rus in shock, for they had never faced such cunning, such discipline, such unrelenting war. Yet the Mongols did not stay. After the victory, they turned back east, carrying spoils and captives, for their orders had not been to conquer Europe, but to test it, to measure its strength. And they had learned enough. Europe was rich, divided, and vulnerable, a land that could wait until another day. Back in the heart of the empire, the Khan gathered his people once more. In his gur, lit with firelight and incense, he spoke of destiny, of the eternal blue sky that guided him. His generals bowed, his sons listened, his banners hung heavy with dust from lands far away. The world seemed endless, but for Genghis Khan, each victory brought it closer to his hand. Not all campaigns were war alone, for the Khan understood that empire needed more than conquest. It needed order and law. The Yasa grew stronger, binding tribes that once fought each other into a single nation. He built networks of messengers, riders who could carry news across thousands of miles in days. He placed governors over cities, ensuring tribute flowed steadily. Trade flourished. Caravans moved under Mongol protection, from China to Persia, from Samarkand to the Caspian. Goods that once took months to travel now moved with safety unknown before. The Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace, was forged in fire, but it carried wealth across the world. And yet, beneath the order, the memory of terror lingered, for each city knew what happened to those who resisted. Ashes were the price of defiance, survival the reward of submission. The Khan gave a choice, but it was a choice heavy with fear. As the empire stretched further, whispers spread even into Europe. Merchants returned with tales of endless horsemen, of banners black against the horizon, of armies that moved faster than thought. To many, it seemed as though the end of the world itself had risen from the east, and still, Genghis Khan pressed forward. His gaze turned from Persia and the Caucasus back toward China, for the Jin still held lands to the south. Defiant behind their walls, their emperors had not yet bowed, and their wealth tempted him. The Khan would not rest until every rival was broken. Picture the steppe at night, the fires of Mongol camps glowing like stars upon the earth, horses grazing in quiet fields, warriors sleeping in their tents. Above them the sky, vast and eternal, and somewhere among them, seated in silence, was the man called Genghis Khan, his eyes lifted to the stars, his mind already fixed on the next campaign. The boy once abandoned, the man once enslaved, now commanded an empire that reached from the Yellow River to the Black Sea. And still he believed it was only the beginning. After the fall of Persia, the eyes of Genghis Khan turned once more to the east, for though the west had been scarred and the Khwarazmian Shah had fallen, there still remained in China empires that had not yet bowed. The Jin Dynasty still stood, ruling the rich lands of northern China. Their emperors had fled south after the fall of Zhongdu, but their armies and cities still held strong. To the Khan, unfinished wars were like open wounds, and he would not leave them untended. But before striking the Jin, his gaze returned to the western Xia, the Tangut kingdom that had once bent to him in tribute. For years they had lived under his shadow, offering goods, grain, silk. Yet now, emboldened by his long absence in the West, they hesitated. They whispered of independence, of alliances with the Jin, of pulling away from Mongol power. For Genghis Khan, this was betrayal. And in his world, betrayal demanded fire. The Mongol armies gathered once more, riders drawn from every corner of the steppe, banners rising like a forest of cloth above the grasslands, siege engines creaking on carts dragged by oxen, drums echoing across valleys. The Khan had grown older, his hair streaked with gray, but his will was as sharp as ever. His voice carried over the camps, promising reward to the loyal, punishment to the false. The march toward western Xia was swift and merciless. Towns burned, fortresses shattered, fields trampled under hoof. The Tangut fought bravely, their cities resisting behind high walls. But the Mongols had grown masters of siegecraft. Their catapults hurled stones day and night. Their sappers undermined gates. Their ladders swarmed against towers. Imagine standing within a Tangut city at night. The sky dark but glowing red with fire from the siege engines. Arrows hissing down like rain, drums pounding outside the walls in endless rhythm. Each day the defenders grew weaker. Each night the enemy seemed stronger, until finally, gates splintered and riders poured through like floodwater. One by one the cities of western Xia fell, until only the capital remained, the great fortress of Yinchuan. There the Tangut rulers pleaded for peace, offering surrender, tribute, loyalty once more. But the Khan did not forget betrayal. He ordered the city destroyed, its people scattered, its name erased from history. And so the Tangut kingdom, once proud and wealthy, was extinguished in fire, the last act of vengeance by a man who had built his empire on loyalty and terror alike. But the Khan's vengeance did not end there. He still hungered for the Jin. He marched south, striking at their strongholds, burning their towns, seizing their fields. The Jin had been weakened by years of Mongol pressure, their armies strained, their people weary. Slowly, the Mongols pressed deeper, The Jin tried to resist. They built massive fortifications, stretched walls across rivers and valleys, gathered armies in desperate defense. Yet the Mongols moved with patience, surrounding cities, cutting off supplies, waiting for hunger to do their work. Siege by siege, year by year, the Jin were ground down. Picture the northern plains of China, once filled with farms and villages, now scarred by war, dust rising where horsemen ride, smoke curling from ruined towns. Refugees fleeing south with whatever they can carry, and behind them, the endless riders, relentless, tireless, pressing ever closer. By the mid-1220s, the Jin had been broken. Though fragments still held in the south, their emperors clung to power, but the Mongols had already written their fate. The empire that once looked down on nomads as barbarians now trembled under their rule. Yet even as victory loomed, time pressed upon Genghis Khan. He was no longer the young rider who had fought for survival on the steppe. His years of war had taken toll. His body bore scars from battle, and his health began to falter. Some say he fell from his horse during a campaign, others that sickness weakened him. The truth remains veiled, but in the summer of 1227, as the Mongol armies closed their fist around the last Tangut strongholds, the Khan's strength faded. He called for his generals, for his sons, for his loyal followers. He gave them orders for the empire to continue, for the wars to go on, for the Mongols never to falter in their unity. Then, in his 65th year, the conqueror of nations, the scourge of kings, the child once abandoned to hunger, breathed his last. The man the world called Genghis Khan was gone. His death was kept secret for a time. The army still at war against Western Xia could not afford to falter. His body was carried back to Mongolia, buried in a secret grave somewhere near the Onon River. Perhaps in the mountains he once knew as a boy. Perhaps in hidden valleys where no man would find him. To this day, the tomb of Genghis Khan remains unknown. Imagine the silence of that burial, the greatest conqueror of his age, lowered into earth without monument, his resting place guarded by secrecy and fear. Some say rivers were diverted to flow over his grave, others that trees were planted to hide it forever. Whether truth or legend, the end was fitting for a man who had risen from nothing and who left behind everything. His empire at the time of his death stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea, larger than any empire before, built in a single lifetime. His sons and grandsons would expand it further, carrying Mongol banners into Europe, into the Middle East, into the very heart of China. The world would tremble again and again at their coming. But in the quiet of his final days, perhaps Genghis Khan remembered the boy he once was, a child abandoned with his family after his father's death, surviving on roots and fish by the river, learning that loyalty and unity were stronger than betrayal. Perhaps he remembered Börte, his wife and companion, taken from him and rescued, standing by him through every campaign. Perhaps he thought of the oath once sworn with Jamukha. Brotherhood turned into rivalry. The lesson that kinship without loyalty is nothing. The story of Genghis Khan is not only war, it is survival, vision, and the power of unity in a world of betrayal. He built his empire on trust as much as on fear, rewarding loyalty, punishing treachery, and binding the Mongols into one people where before there had only been tribes. Close your eyes now and imagine the endless steppe under moonlight. Horses grazing in silence, fires glowing across a vast camp, banners swaying gently in the night wind, and somewhere in that vision, the figure of the Khan himself, gazing into the horizon, knowing that even as his body failed, his dream had already become larger than life. The boy called Temüjin, the man called Genghis Khan, remains a name carried by history like thunder across the ages. His story continues, not only in the wars he fought, but in the memory of a world forever changed. When Genghis Khan closed his eyes for the last time in 1227, the world did not yet know what had ended or what had begun. His death was hidden, carried in silence so that his armies would not falter. His body returned in secret to the steppe, to a grave that has never been found. Yet even in death, his voice lingered, for he had left behind not only an empire, but a plan, a system of order and law, a way of war, a vision of unity under the eternal blue sky. The empire he created stretched wider than any before, from the rivers of China to the shores of the Caspian, from the forests of Siberia to the deserts of Persia, and at his passing, it was divided among his sons, 4 pillars to carry the weight of his dream. His eldest was Jamukha, a son born under a shadow, for some whispered that he was not the Khan's child, but the child of Börte's captivity. Whether true or not, the whispers never faded, and though Genghis Khan gave him lands in the west, he never fully trusted him. His second was Chagatai, fiery of temper, strict in loyalty, often harsh. He received the lands of Central Asia, deserts and mountains, trade routes and cities scarred by war. His third son was Ogedei, patient, steady, chosen above all others to carry the title of Great Khan. He inherited the heart of the empire, the lands of Mongolia itself, and the sacred duty of ruling from the center. His youngest was Tolui, fierce in battle, loyal in heart. He guarded the homelands, leading armies with the same fire as his father. His line would one day carry the empire to even greater heights. Together, these sons and their descendants carried the legacy forward, each one shaping the empire in his own image. After 1227, the empire mourned in silence. But soon, the banners rose again, for the wars had not ended with the life of one man. Ogedei was confirmed as Great Khan, and under his command, the Mongols pressed further. In the east, the war against the Jin Dynasty continued. The Jin emperors still held lands in the south, still defiant, still claiming the mandate of heaven. But year after year, the Mongols pressed them, surrounding cities, cutting fields, breaking fortresses, until at last, in 1234, the Jin were destroyed. Imagine the fall of their last capital. Walls once thought unbreakable, toppled under the weight of siege towers and catapults, fires rising into night, voices crying in despair. And in the silence after, Mongol banners rising above ruins, the dynasty that had ruled for generations, gone in fire and dust, with the Jin destroyed. The road opened deeper into China, yet the Mongols did not strike the song immediately. Instead, they turned west once more, for their ambitions were wide. Ogedei sent his generals into Korea, into Persia, and into the lands of the Rus. The greatest of these was Subutai, the master strategist, who had served the Khan before. Now he carried Mongol armies further than ever before, into the very heart of Europe. In 1241, Mongol horsemen rode into Hungary and Poland, their arrows cutting down knights in armor, their feigned retreats scattering armies. At the Battle of Legnica, Polish and German knights fell before their precision. At the Battle of Mohi, the Hungarian army was crushed beneath their arrows and charges. Imagine the terror in Europe. For centuries they had heard whispers of enemies in the east, tales of horsemen who came like ghosts, and now those whispers became thunder on their own fields. Cities burned, villages emptied, and for a time it seemed as though nothing could stop them. But then, suddenly, the storm withdrew. The great Khan Ogedei had died in 1241, and the generals were recalled to Mongolia to elect a new ruler. Europe breathed in relief, but the memory of that invasion lingered, a shadow that haunted kings for generations. While the West trembled, the East still waited, for China remained divided, the Song dynasty ruling the rich lands of the South, their cities vast, their culture deep, their wealth unrivaled. To conquer them would take decades, and it would fall not to Ogedei, but to later heirs. Among those heirs was Jamukha, grandson of the great Khan, stern, determined. Under his reign, the Mongols struck again at the heart of Asia. He sent his brother Hulagu into the Middle East, where the armies of Islam had long resisted. In 1258, Hulagu laid siege to Baghdad, the jewel of the Abbasid Caliphate. For centuries, it had been a center of learning, libraries filled with books, markets filled with goods, mosques filled with prayer. But when the Mongols entered, the city was destroyed. Its libraries burned, its scholars killed, the caliph executed, Baghdad reduced from glory to ruin. the shock spread across the Islamic world. For centuries later, people would speak of the Mongols as a scourge sent by God, a reminder of how quickly greatness can be turned to ashes. In China, it was Kubilai, another grandson, who would one day complete what his grandfather began. In 1271, he declared the Jin Dynasty, ruling all of China under Mongol banners. For the first time, the Empire of the Steppe ruled the Middle Kingdom. Yet even as his descendants expanded, the memory of Genghis Khan remained central. His laws, his discipline, his vision of unity guided them. His tomb remained hidden, but his presence lingered in every banner, every oath, every campaign. Close your eyes and picture the empire at its height, stretching from the shores of the Pacific to the rivers of Hungary, from the forests of Siberia to the deserts of Arabia. A quarter of the world under one rule, connected by roads, guarded by riders, bound by fear and by law. Caravans moved safely across thousands of miles, carrying silk, spices, silver, and glass. Scholars traveled under Mongol protection, bringing knowledge from east to west, ideas that had once been trapped in one corner of the world, now spread like fire across continents. Gunpowder, printing, medicine, mathematics, all carried along the arteries of empire. Yet beneath the order, the terror remained. For each city remembered the price of resistance. The memory of flames haunted them. The Mongol peace was forged in fear. And still, within that fear, the vision of Genghis Khan lived on. The boy of the Onan River, the man called Temüjin, the Khan who rose from hunger, who learned loyalty through betrayal, who built unity from chaos. His sons and grandsons carried his name into every corner of the world. When you think of empire, you might imagine palaces and thrones, but the Mongol throne was a felt tent, its walls of wool, its pillars of wood, carried wherever the riders went. Their empire was not carved in stone, but carried on the backs of horses. And perhaps that is why it spread so far. For stone can crumble, but a tent can be moved. Stone can anchor, but a horse can fly. In time, the great empire would fragment, divided among lines of descent, weakened by distance and ambition. Yet the shadow of the Khan remained. Even in lands where Mongol power faded, his name carried weight, sometimes as a curse, sometimes as a legend, always as a reminder of the storm that once swept across the world. The years after the fall of the Khwarazmian Empire brought no rest to Genghis Khan, for though he had broken kings in the west and cast fire upon Persia, the world was not yet fully bowed. In the east, the Jin still clung to their southern lands. Though their capital of Zhongdu had fallen, their armies endured, resisting the steppe storm as best they could. To the Khan, Unfinished enemies were like embers in dry grass. Left alone, they would burn again. And so he planned to return. But before he marched south once more, he turned his strength against the Western Xia, the Tangut kingdom that had once sworn loyalty to him. They had bent under his hand in earlier years, but after his long campaigns in the West, they began to pull away, whispering of alliance with the Jin, refusing tribute, hoping the storm had passed, to Genghis Khan. Such defiance was betrayal, and betrayal was always answered with steel. The Mongol armies gathered once more, riders stretching across the horizon, drums rolling like distant thunder, siege carts dragged by oxen, banners whipping against cold wind. The Khan rode among them, older now, but still fierce, scars across his body, eyes sharp with the same fire that had burned in his youth. The campaign against Western Xia was swift, merciless. Town after town fell beneath hoof and flame. Cities tried to resist behind thick walls, but the Mongols had mastered the art of siege. Their catapults hurled stones. Their fire pots turned night skies into embers. Their ladders swarmed against towers. Each city crumbled, one after another. The Tangut people fought bravely, but bravery could not match relentlessness. They sent envoys begging for peace, but the Khan refused, for to him, broken oaths deserved no forgiveness. While the war raged in the west, the Khan also tightened his grip on the steppe itself. He expanded the yasa, his great code of law, ensuring that justice reached from herdsmen in felt tents to governors in captured cities. Theft was punished harshly, betrayal by death, but loyalty was rewarded richly. Spoils divided fairly, ranks granted to men of merit rather than birth. Imagine a camp at night, warriors seated in circles around fires, meat roasting on spits, horses grazing nearby, and above them, banners of black and white horsehair swaying. Each man bound not only by oath to his Khan, but by the knowledge that order gave them strength greater than numbers alone. For Genghis Khan was not only conqueror, he was organizer. He divided his army into units of 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. Each soldier knew his duty, each leader his place. In battle, signals of flags and drums guided them, like a single body moving with perfect rhythm. This discipline allowed them to strike faster than any foe. A Mongol army could cover 100 miles in a day, living from their herds, drinking mare's milk, drying meat in strips beneath their saddles. They needed no supply wagons, no roads, no rest beyond what their horses could endure. Against such speed, enemies had no answer. And still, the Khan's vision reached further. Beyond mountains lay kingdoms he had not yet touched. Beyond deserts lay cities still rich with treasure. To him, the world seemed endless, but not unreachable. He sent envoys across Asia, demanding submission. Some rulers bowed quickly, sending tribute of gold and silk, for they had heard the fate of those who resisted. Others scoffed, believing their walls could protect them. Their names, too, would be written in ash. Even as he waged war, the Khan thought of trade, for war fed the empire, but trade enriched it. Caravans moved under Mongol protection, carrying silk from China, spices from India, silver from Persia. He placed guards along roads, ensuring safe passage where once bandits had thrived. Picture a caravan winding through desert, camels heavy with goods, riders guiding them by starlight, and in the shadows nearby, Mongol patrols watching silently, blades at their sides, ensuring that no thief dared approach. This order, harsh as it was, brought peace across lands that had known only chaos. For a time, merchants could travel from the Yellow River to the Caspian Sea without fear, and though they whispered of terror, they admitted also to safety. The Khan's empire had become more than conquest. It was a world of roads, laws, and fear. And yet, for all his victories, for all the banners raised, age pressed upon him. The man who had once been a boy named Temüjin, who had survived betrayal and hunger, was now gray at the temples, his body scarred, his breath heavier, but his mind remained sharp, and his will unbroken. In the early 1220s, while his armies pressed the Jin, while Western Shia resisted in desperation, the Khan himself rode once more into the field, commanding in person. His presence among his warriors gave strength, for to them, he was more than a leader. He was destiny itself. Legends say he fell from his horse during a campaign, that his injuries never fully healed. Some say sickness took him, others that the gods themselves called him to the eternal blue sky. Whatever the truth, his strength began to fade. But even as his body weakened, his voice remained steady. He called his sons, his generals, his loyal companions. He told them that unity must endure beyond his life, that the empire must not fracture, that the eternal blue sky had given them a task, and that it must be carried on. Still the wars pressed on. The Tengut capital of Yinchuan stood besieged. Its rulers sent pleas of surrender, offering tribute. But the Khan's answer was silence. His command was destruction, for he remembered their betrayal, and betrayal was a wound he would not forgive. By the summer of 1227, the city was shattered, its walls broken, its people scattered, the Tangut kingdom erased. A final act of vengeance, carried out even as the Khan himself grew weaker. Not long after, he closed his eyes for the last time, his body carried back to Mongolia, to be buried in secret. Somewhere among rivers and forests he had known as a boy, perhaps beneath mountains, perhaps in hidden valleys. His resting place remains unknown. Imagine the procession, warriors riding in silence, banners lowered, horses' hooves muffled. The greatest conqueror of his age, carried home in secrecy, his grave hidden by oath and fear, his name left not in stone, but in memory. And yet, even in death, his shadow stretched across continents. For the empire he had forged was larger than any before. His sons would carry it on. His grandsons would expand it further. But the story of Genghis Khan himself, the boy Temüjin who rose from hunger to rule the world, would echo forever across the steppe. The summer of 1227 carried a heavy silence across the Mongol world, for though the armies still moved and the banners still rose, their master had fallen. Genghis Khan was gone. Yet the news was not shouted. It was hidden, wrapped in silence like a secret too heavy to speak. His generals and sons swore oaths to keep it, for the armies were still in the field, still pressing against the Tangut of western Shia, and the death of the Khan could not be allowed to weaken them, so his passing was concealed. The soldiers were told only to fight harder, as if he still watched from his tent, and in truth, many believed he did. The great tent of the Khan still stood in the center of camp, its walls of felt heavy with dust, its banners raised as always. At night the fires still glowed within. Guards stood at the entrance, as if their master might step out at any moment. But inside, there was no voice, no command, only silence. When the final Tangut stronghold was destroyed and vengeance fulfilled, the secret was carried home, across deserts and mountains, across rivers and forests. His body was borne toward the lands of his birth. Imagine the procession, warriors riding in silence, their armor darkened by dust, their banners lowered but still flying, the hooves of horses striking the earth like muffled drums. No songs, no cries, only the steady rhythm of movement. As the Khan returned to the steppe, some say that as the procession passed, every witness was silenced, so that no man could reveal the path of his burial. Villages emptied, travelers vanished, leaving the road to secrecy. Others say rivers were diverted, their waters turned to wash over his grave, concealing it forever beneath shifting earth. Still others whisper that forests were planted, their roots spreading over the resting place, guarding it for eternity. The truth is lost. His grave has never been found, not in valleys, not in mountains, not in plains. Only the silence remains. Picture that hidden place, somewhere beneath wide sky, perhaps near the Onan River where he was born, perhaps in the Khenti Mountains where he hunted as a boy, perhaps in a valley where no man dared walk again, a mound of earth, unmarked, unvisited, and beneath it, the body of the man once called Temüjin, the Khan who commanded the world. Even in death, he ruled. For his laws still bound the people. His armies still obeyed the order he had created. His vision still directed the steps of his sons. It was as if his spirit had not left, but lingered, watching from the eternal blue sky above. The mourning of the Mongols was quiet but deep. In the camps, fires burned low. Horses were led in silence. Warriors carried their weapons reversed. Children were told the stories of the boy who had grown into a Khan, the hunger he had endured, the betrayals he had overcome, the unity he had forged. Börte, his wife and companion of so many years, wept with dignity, for she had been taken from him once, rescued by his courage, and had stood beside him through every storm. Now she stood again, her face steady, though her heart carried the weight of loss. His sons, Joki, Chagatai, Ogodei, and Tolui, gathered in sorrow. Each carried memories of a father who was more than father, a man who was storm and fire, who punished betrayal without hesitation, but who gave loyalty like iron. Some loved him with pride, some feared him with awe, but all felt the emptiness of his absence. Still, the empire did not collapse, for his laws were strong. His system of ranks and units kept the armies together. His code of Yasa gave order where there might have been chaos, and his dream of unity bound the tribes who once had fought endlessly against each other. At night, when warriors sat by their fires, they still spoke his name. They told stories of his youth, of the boy Temüjin abandoned after Yasuge's death, of his mother Hoylun feeding her children roots and fish, of the sworn brotherhood with Jamukha that had turned into rivalry. They told of his battles, his escapes, his vengeance, and his mercy to those who remained loyal. These stories flowed like rivers through the camp, not only as memory, but as teaching. For every rider knew that to follow the path of the Khan was to find strength. To betray his example was to invite ruin. Imagine lying beneath the stars of the steppe, hearing such stories carried on the wind, the fire crackling softly, the horses shifting nearby, the sky vast and endless above, and in that silence, the sense that the Khan himself still listened, still watched, still rode across the heavens. The secrecy of his tomb became legend. Some claim that horses trampled the ground until no trace remained, others that 1,000 men carried the body and then were themselves executed so that none could reveal the truth. Others that even birds were killed above the burial site to silence the sky itself. Centuries later, men would still search, still dig, still wonder where the conqueror lay. But the earth has kept its secret, and perhaps that is fitting, for a man who lived larger than life should rest in mystery. His death did not end his wars, for the campaigns he commanded still moved forward. His armies still fought, still conquered, as if his will reached from beyond the grave. Only later did the world realize that the Khan himself was gone. The silence of his passing gave strength to his legend, for some believed he had not died, but merely vanished into the sky, waiting to return. Others believed his spirit rode with storms, thundering across the steppe, watching over his descendants. His name became more than history. It became myth. Even as his sons prepared to divide lands, they did so in the shadow of his presence. Ogedei named as Great Khan, but always with the reminder that he ruled not in his own name, but in the name of Genghis Khan. Every victory they would win, every city they would take, every oath sworn by their soldiers, all carried his echo. For the Mongols, his life was a mirror of their own struggle. He had been poor, hungry, betrayed, abandoned. Yet he had risen above it all. He had united clans that had once killed each other. He had broken kingdoms that had mocked them as savages. He had forced the world to speak his name, and now, even in death, his story gave them strength. Picture again his burial, not marked by stone, not carved in temples, but hidden beneath earth and sky. No monument rises above him, and yet his monument is the empire itself, stretching across deserts, mountains, forests, rivers, an empire too vast to see in one lifetime, built from the vision of one man. Close your eyes and imagine the eternal blue sky above the steppe, horses running free across grass that stretches forever, warriors riding in formation, banners rising into wind, and above it all, the unseen presence of the Khan, no longer flesh, but spirit, no longer riding the earth, but riding the heavens. The boy, Temüjin, the man called Genghis Khan, though buried in secret, remained alive in every whisper of wind across the plains, in every oath sworn by his people, in every hoofbeat that shook the earth. And so, though his body was gone, his story lived, carried like breath itself, unending, eternal. The secret of the Khan's death drifted across the empire like a hidden wind, unseen yet felt everywhere. The armies returned from western Shia carrying silence, the banners still raised, the drums still beating, as if their masters still rode among them. To the common soldier, it seemed he was only away from sight, that he would appear again with a word, for no one dared speak otherwise. And so his presence lingered, stronger than absence. In the camps of the steppe, the stories of his life were told with greater fire than ever before. Around the fires, men spoke of the boy Temüjin who had known hunger, of the youth who had been betrayed by clans and captured in wooden stocks, of the man who had built loyalty from nothing. They told these tales not as distant history, but as if he still listened, as if the telling itself kept him alive. And in truth, perhaps it did, for his laws still bound the people. His yasa gave order. His vision of unity held the tribes together. His oath of loyalty still echoed in the voices of his generals. When a soldier rode into battle, he did not fight only for his commander, but for the Khan who had made the Mongols one. When a merchant carried silk along the road, he did so under the protection of the Khan's law. When a herdsman watched his flocks upon the plains, he did so knowing that the Khan's shadow still stretched over the grass. It was as if death had not ended his rule, but only lifted it higher, from the earth to the eternal blue sky. In Mongolia, the great assembly still gathered, the Kurultai still met, Warriors and nobles sat in circles, discussing campaigns and tribute, and though they named new leaders, they did so always in his name. Every oath sworn began with his memory, every decision bound to his example. His sons carried his will like a torch. Ogedei, chosen as Great Khan, ruled with steady hand, but always spoke of his father's vision. Chagatai, fiery and harsh, invoked his father's discipline in judgment. Tolui, fierce in battle, fought as if the Khan himself still guided his hand. And even Jochi, though shadowed by questions of birth, was remembered as the eldest who carried his father's blood. Yet none of them dared claim to replace him. For how could they? His shadow was too vast, his story too deeply etched into every heart. Picture the steppe under moonlight, riders moving across open grass, their hooves leaving no trace. In their minds, the Khan rides with them, his banner high above the stars, his voice steady in the wind. For them, he was not dead, he was eternal. In far-off cities, too, his presence lingered. In Samarkand and Bukhara, in Nishapur and Herat, the ruins still smoked where his wrath had fallen. Survivors spoke his name in whispers. Parents told their children not to defy him, even long after his death. For to resist the Mongols was to invite his spirit, still watching, still commanding destruction. In China, the Jin emperors trembled. Though they knew the man was gone, his armies still pressed them, as if his will had passed into their very hooves, into their very boughs. It was as though the Khan's breath still rode the wind, driving the Mongols ever forward. The merchants of the Silk Road too felt him, for the roads were guarded, caravans safe under Mongol protection, and each trader who passed from one end of Asia to the other thanked the Khan's name, for it was his order that allowed such peace. His empire was both terror and safety, both storm and shelter. Even the envoys who carried his decrees after his death spoke with his voice, for when they delivered messages to kings, they did not say, Ogedei commands. They said, the Khan commands, as though the first Khan still ruled. It is strange to think of a man so present in absence, but for the Mongols, the Khan had never been only flesh. He was destiny made into form. He was the eternal blue sky given voice. And so, when his body was gone, the spirit remained. Some warriors swore they saw him in dreams, riding across the horizon, his horse black against the setting sun. Others claimed to hear his voice in storms, thundering like hooves across the heavens. Others said the cry of eagles carried his warning, that he still watched, sharp-eyed from above. In time, his tomb became legend. Tales spread that it was guarded by spirits, that anyone who came near would be struck down, that even animals avoided it, and rivers bent away from its place. Whether true or not, the belief itself was enough. No one dared seek him. No one dared disturb the silence. And so, the Khan remained, not gone, but hidden. His presence felt in every law, every banner, every hoofbeat across the earth. Imagine lying beneath the stars of the steppe, the sky stretching endless, the air cool with night, horses breathing softly, fires glowing in the distance, and in that vast silence, you feel a weight above you, not heavy, but endless. The sense that someone watches still, a presence vast as the horizon. That is the memory of Genghis Khan. The boy called Temüjin had lived a life of hunger and betrayal. The man called Genghis Khan had built an empire of law and fear, and in death, he became more than man. He became the eternal rider, the storm that never passed. And so, even in the years after his passing, the Mongols fought as though he still rode with them. His generals still invoked his name, his sons still claimed his blessing, and the world still trembled when they heard it spoken. Long after his body had been lowered into secret earth, the world still felt the weight of Genghis Khan. His armies rode under new commanders, but his name was never left behind. It was spoken at dawn before battle, whispered by envoys before kings, and remembered by villagers far beyond the reach of his banners. For to the Mongols, he was still their Khan. Even in death, he had not released them. His laws bound them. His vision directed them. His shadow stretched across every mile of steppe and desert. In Persia, survivors of his fury spoke of him as punishment sent from heaven. They told stories of Nishapur burned to ash, of Baghdad threatened in the distance, of caravans seized by riders who moved faster than wind. To them, his name became less a man and more a curse, whispered to frighten children, prayed against in mosques. In China, the Jin who still clung to their cities felt his presence even after his passing. The walls they built, the rivers they fortified, the soldiers they armed, all were defenses against a man already gone. For the Mongols pressed on, carrying his memory into each siege, as though he still rode among them. In the far west, in the lands of Europe, rumors of him grew larger than truth. Traders returned from the east with tales of horsemen who could not be stopped, of cities erased in days, of kings who bent their knees before a rider from the steppe. The name Genghis Khan reached the ears of kings in Hungary, in Poland, in France, in England. None had seen him, but all felt his shadow. Picture a European court in the 13th century, a hall of stone filled with knights and nobles, torches flickering against cold walls. A traveler enters, his clothes worn from the long road. He kneels and speaks of a Khan who commands 100,000 riders, who punishes betrayal with fire, who rewards loyalty with gold. The hall falls silent, for they know not if he speaks of man, or of a force rising from the east like storm clouds. Even in lands untouched by his armies, the name alone was enough to shape fear. To many, he was not only conqueror, but prophecy. Some believed he was the scourge foretold in holy books. Others thought he was a king from the ends of the earth, sent to test the faithful. Among the Mongols themselves, his presence was deeper still. In every camp, his yasa was repeated, his discipline enforced. Soldiers spoke of how he once punished theft with death, of how he rewarded the loyal even if they were poor. These laws did not fade with his passing. They grew stronger, as if written into the very wind of the steppe. When Ogedei took the throne of Great Khan, he did so not as replacement, but as caretaker, each decision framed as extension of his father's will, each conquest begun with his father's name, and so the empire moved forward, as though Temüjin still breathed. Merchants crossing the Silk Road felt him too. They traveled beneath the safety his empire provided. The Pax Mongolica, though not yet named, was born of his vision. Caravans passed from China to Persia with unheard-of speed, each one thanking the Khan's shadow, even if his body was gone. Imagine a caravan under desert stars, camels loaded with silk and porcelain, horses carrying spices and glass, traders seated by a small fire, speaking of the Khan. Some call him ruthless, others call him protector, but all agree his empire has made the road safe, and in that safety, his presence lingers. Even the enemies who once cursed him began to weave him into their histories. Some wrote of him as a barbarian without mercy, others as a general without equal, and slowly, across languages and lands, he became myth as much as memory. Legends grew. Some said he was not dead at all, but had vanished into the eternal blue sky, riding still among the stars, waiting to return. Others said his tomb was guarded by spirits, that the earth itself had swallowed him to keep him safe. Still others believed his soul moved with storms, thundering across the heavens whenever lightning split the sky. For the Mongols, these stories were not superstition. They were truth carried in breath. For each time thunder rolled over the steppe, they felt their Khan close. Each time a storm broke over mountains, they whispered his name, knowing he still guided them. And perhaps, in a way, he did. For his sons carried his discipline, his generals carried his strategy, his people carried his laws. His empire expanded not only with steel, but with memory, as though the Khan himself had poured part of his spirit into each of them, ensuring that even death could not silence him. Picture the vast empire under moonlight, palaces rising in captured cities, markets alive with goods from far lands, steppe camps glowing with fires, caravans moving across deserts. Everywhere, his mark remained. For in every order given, in every law upheld, in every soldier's loyalty, there was the echo of the first Khan. And so, the world carried him still, a man buried in secret, but alive in legend, a name spoken in fear, in respect, in awe. The boy Temüjin had become the eternal rider, not confined to earth, but roaming the horizons of history. Long after his bones had vanished into hidden earth, long after his banners no longer flapped above his tent, the name of Genghis Khan still thundered across the world. It was no longer a name spoken only by his soldiers, but a name whispered in temples, in palaces, in marketplaces where men had never seen a Mongol horse. For the man Temüjin had risen beyond himself. He had become a figure of myth, a storm on the edge of memory, a presence that could not be contained by death. On the steppes, his people still rode with the certainty that he watched them from the eternal blue sky. Warriors swore oaths in his name. Children were taught that betrayal would bring his wrath. Mothers reminded their sons to be loyal and strong, for the Khan still judged them, even unseen. At night, when thunder rolled over the plains, riders whispered that it was the hoofbeats of the Khan's horse, galloping across the heavens. When lightning split the sky, they said it was the flash of his blade, cutting the air, reminding them that he was not gone, only changed. In Persia, his name became curse and legend both. Poets wrote of the wrath that had fallen upon Nishapur and Herat. Scholars spoke of him as scourge sent by heaven to punish the arrogant. Yet even in hatred, they admitted his greatness, that no king had ever carved so vast a shadow. In China, his enemies remembered him as a figure of destiny. The Jin who had fought him to the end spoke his name in fear. The peasants told stories of how he rode like ghostly wind, that his eyes saw every betrayal, that no wall could hide from him. And even as they cursed him, they admitted his inevitability. In Europe, his legend grew strange and vast, for kings had not seen him, yet they trembled at tales of his riders. Priests preached that he was the scourge of God, foretold in Holy Scripture. Knights whispered of him as a monster, half man, half demon. Merchants told stories of his face shining with fire, his horse drinking the blood of rivers. None had met him, yet all feared him. Imagine a small village in Hungary, years after the Mongols had withdrawn, the fields regrown, the houses rebuilt, but the people still lowering their voices when the east wind blows. They say the Khan rides upon that wind, searching for defiance, promising to return. Even among his descendants, his presence was not gone. Ogedei ruled as Great Khan, but every decree carried his father's authority. Every victory claimed its continuation of his vision. Even when the empire fractured into branches, the Golden Horde, the Chagatai Khanate, the Ilkhanate, the Yuan in China, each one claimed the blessing of Genghis Khan, as though his spirit gave legitimacy to their power. His tomb, still hidden, became more powerful in absence than any monument in stone. No temple could contain him, no palace could display him. Instead, his grave became the greatest mystery of empire, protected by silence, by secrecy, by fear. Men searched, but found nothing, as though the earth itself had swallowed him. Legends spread that his grave was guarded by spirits, that rivers had been bent to flow over it, that 1,000 horses had trampled the ground until it showed no trace. Some swore that those who sought it were struck by misfortune, that illness or storm fell upon them, as if the Khan himself still defended his rest. And yet, this mystery did not diminish him. It made him greater. For a man hidden from earth seemed closer to heaven. For a grave unseen seemed proof that he had never died at all. Among his people, he became not only Khan, but ancestor, not only ruler, but symbol of destiny. The eternal blue sky itself seemed to carry his name. The mountains whispered it in their winds. The rivers carried it in their flow. And so, his story did not end. It expanded. Each retelling made him larger. Each legend made him stranger. He was the boy who had survived hunger. He was the man who had conquered kingdoms. He was the spirit who now rode storms, guiding his descendants into wars they believed were blessed. Picture the empire at its height, stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the Black Sea, palaces rising in Beijing, markets alive in Samarkand, mosques echoing with prayer in Baghdad, churches ringing in the Ruslands, and behind it all, in every prayer, in every oath, in every whisper of fear, the shadow of Genghis Khan. Even those who hated him could not escape him. He lived in their memories as fire, in their songs as warning, in their scriptures as scourge. His name carried across languages, distorted, reshaped, but always heavy, always feared. And among the Mongols themselves, his memory was gentler. They remembered the Khan not only as conqueror, but as father, as giver of law, as builder of unity. They remembered his fairness in dividing spoils, his insistence that the poor be rewarded if they proved loyal, his vision that no tribe should fight another when they could fight together. This dual memory, terror to some, fairness to others, storm to all, made him more than human. It made him eternal. At night, as fires burned low, storytellers spoke his name softly, their words moving like lullabies through the camp. They told of how he had once escaped his captors with the help of a single guard. They told of how he had rescued Börte, of how he had turned betrayal into vengeance, of how he had raised banners above tribes who once swore never to bow. They told these tales as lessons, not only of war, but of life. And perhaps this is why his story endured. For it was not only about conquest, it was about survival, about unity, about the belief that even the weakest boy on the steppe could rise to command kings. The boy Temüjin had died long before, replaced by the man, the Khan, the storm of the steppe. But even when that man died, the story of the boy still lingered, reminding his people of where he had begun and where they too might go. Close your eyes now and imagine the steppe at twilight, the sun sinking low, the grass bending in wind, the sky vast and endless, and in that fading light, you see the shadow of a rider, distant yet clear, his banner streaming behind him, his horse steady beneath him. He does not fade with night. He only becomes part of the sky itself. That is the presence of Genghis Khan. Not gone, but eternal. Not man, but destiny itself. The story of Genghis Khan did not end with his burial, nor with the silence of his tomb. For centuries after his death, his name continued to shape the world, as though the boy Temüjin had never fully left. On the steppe, the grass still whispered of him. Families spoke his story by firelight. Children carried his memory like inheritance. Warriors swore loyalty with his name upon their lips. And in the quiet between battles, when wind rolled over the plains, they said it was the Khan himself, watching, listening, judging. In China, emperors who followed tried to erase him, but his victories were carved too deep. Cities he had taken still bore scars. Roads he had secured still carried caravans. And though his enemies despised him, they built their defenses with his shadow in mind, as though even in death, he still commanded their labor. In Persia, poets lamented the fall of cities. Scholars wrote of him as a scourge sent by God. Yet in the same breath, they admitted that he had forged something vast, something terrifying and ordered at once. They cursed his cruelty, but acknowledged his law. In Europe, priests spoke of him as the horseman of apocalypse, a figure foretold in scripture. They told congregations that his riders were the punishment of heaven, that his victories were warnings, that the world must repent before the storm returned. To peasants who had never seen the Mongols, his name alone was enough to stir fear. And so, across every horizon, his presence lingered. For those who loved him, he was justice and law. For those who hated him, he was fire and ruin. For all, he was unforgettable. His empire stretched on through his sons. Ogoday in the center, steady and calm. Chagatai in Central Asia, fierce and unbending. Tolui at the heart of Mongolia, fierce in war. And Jochi's heirs ruling in the west. Though they divided the lands, they all claimed him still. No Khan ruled without invoking his name. No battle began without recalling his victories. It was as though the man had dissolved into the empire itself. His blood carried in his descendants, his breath carried in the wind, his laws carried in the words of judges and generals. The body gone, but the presence everywhere. Merchants crossing the Silk Road spoke of him long after his death. They carried stories of his discipline, of his promise that roads would be safe, of his punishment for thieves and betrayers. To them, the empire he built was both terror and shelter, for they feared him, but they trusted him too. In the camps of the Mongols, storytellers did not speak of his end. They spoke of his rise. They told of the boy Temüjin abandoned after Yesugei's death, of his mother Holun feeding her children roots and fish, of the friendships he forged, the betrayals he endured, the loyalty he rewarded. They told of his battles against the Merkits, against the Tatars, against Jamukha. They told of the Kurultai where he was raised as universal ruler, his name becoming Genghis Khan. These stories flowed not as distant tales, but as living memory. For each listener felt that the Khan's path was still their path, that his strength was still their strength, that his endurance was still their example. Even the silence of his tomb fed the legend, for no one could say where he rested. Some swore it was in the mountains of Khenti, hidden beneath forests planted by loyal followers. Some claimed rivers had been turned to wash over him, hiding him forever beneath flowing water. Others said the earth had swallowed him whole, keeping him safe from the eyes of men. Picture the steppe beneath moonlight, endless grass swaying in the wind, the sky dark but glittering with stars, and beneath it, silence. Within that silence, the certainty that the Khan still rides, unseen, unending. His laws remained long after his passing. The yasa was repeated in courts, enforced in camps, quoted by generals. It punished betrayal, protected loyalty, and gave unity to a people once broken by feuds. Even when his empire split into branches, the yasa was still invoked, still honored as his voice. And so, his spirit remained the spine of an empire too large for one man, but still bound by one man's memory. Centuries later, when his descendants ruled in China, in Persia, in Russia, they still claimed his blessing. Even when they fought each other, they said they fought in his shadow. His name was the measure of power, for who could claim to rule without tying themselves to the first Khan? In time, the empire fractured, distance and ambition tore it apart. Yet his presence did not fade. It stretched across the cracks, binding the story even when the lands were divided. The world he made outlived the unity he forged, and still, his name traveled, whispered by monks in far-off lands, written by merchants in their ledgers, spoken by kings in their courts, in every tongue, distorted, reshaped, but always carrying the same weight. The boy Temüjin had become legend. The man Genghis Khan had become eternal. Close your eyes and imagine him one last time. A boy walking by the Onan River, hungry, cold, carrying only hope and will. A young man swearing brotherhood with Jamukha, then learning betrayal. A husband rescuing Börte, a leader raising banners across the steppe, a conqueror riding into Zhongdu, into Samarkand, into Bukhara, a ruler laying down laws, uniting tribes, breaking kingdoms. Now imagine him older, scarred, weary, his breath heavy with years of war, yet still riding, still commanding, still shaping the world. And finally, picture the silence after. his horse grazing without him, his tent empty, his grave hidden, the empire carrying on as if he still watched. That is how the story of Genghis Khan ends, not in death, but in eternity, his body gone, his tomb unseen, his name never silenced. The boy abandoned, became the ruler of worlds. The man who rose from hunger became the storm of history, and the Khan who closed his eyes still rides in memory, in legend, in the endless horizon of the eternal blue sky. Now let the story fade gently, like fire dying to embers, like hoofbeats vanishing across plains, like banners lowering into stillness. The Khan rests, the empire sleeps, the steppe is quiet, and you too may rest now, carried by the silence of history into dreams where the sky is endless and the rider eternal.